Welcome to Suddenly Different, where we explore stories and strategies for life when it doesn't go to plan. I'm Leigh-Anne Sharland, inviting you to join me on this journey.
What do you do when life keeps knocking you down again and again, and yet your heart still insists on rising? My guest today, Karen Lyons, is living proof that even in the face of teenage motherhood, 4 children under 21, going back to school, chronic illnesses, a car crash that left her body broken, her spirit has never stopped shining. She has walked through wilderness, literally living in a tent, couch surfing, rebuilding life from the ground up, and still found her way back to self-love, to purpose, and to joy. From running an exercise business, performing alongside Humphrey B there, and building a multi-million-dollar property development, and maybe co-owning a restaurant in between, to starting over as a life coach, human behavior specialist, and now the Love Hypnotist, Karen has become a beacon to everyone she meets. Her energy radiates love the moment she enters a room, and despite health challenges, and she has some, she stands as a determined, beautiful soul, one who shows us that love and passion are more powerful than pain. She's a mother, a grandmother, and a guide for others seeking the acceptance and deep inner love she herself has claimed. Today, we get to step into her extraordinary story. Karen, welcome. It is so great to see you again and to share this experience with you.
Amazing to see you, Leigh-Anne, and thank you for all of that. Wow, I think I want to actually listen to me.
I am expecting our listeners will too.
I hope so. I hope there's value in it if there's value in it for one person, that's abundant in itself.
That's right. So
where would you like to start, darling?
Let us start. So when people meet you now, they feel that radiant field of love immediately, just like I did. But that light has been forged through fire. Can you share the suddenly different moment that pops into your head right now that you knew that you couldn't keep living the old way?
What do you mean by the old way? As in?
Well, as in that you knew that your trajectory had changed from what you imagined as a child. You know how as children we imagine, I'm going to be a teacher or I'm going to be an astronaut.
Well, other than, becoming a geneticist, pretty much everything else I'd imagined as a child was fulfilled.
Wow.
There are only 2 things. One was there was always this fork in the road for me. It was always a choice of, do I take the path of my creative side and entertainment fundamentally, or do I take the path of learning more about us as human beings, whether it be psychologically, whether it be genetically, whether it be medically? There was always these 2 forks in the road for me. Both of them felt really comfortable and both of them felt exciting. And the odd one out in between all that was to be a station manager in Antarctica. So, and that was also forged in childhood, which we've discussed because of when I was 11, I got rheumatic fever. And in those days, way back when, we were advised to stay in bed for an entire year. So I was an 11-year-old being told to stay in bed for a year. I had a pretty strong foundation of knowing who I was as a young girl, fortunately for me. Some through some unfortunate circumstances, which then ended up becoming fortunate circumstances, as in my childhood. And others because I had significantly, absolutely epic role models in my mother, but particularly my maternal grandmother. So she showed me, as a byproduct of who she was, just being her, how to shine a light. My mother taught me tolerance and patience, because I was not very patient when I was a child, and diplomacy, because my grandmother was not diplomatic at all. She just said it how it was. So between the two of them, there was this delicious combination that at the time, I don't know that I really appreciated, but later on as an older woman, I was like, wow, not everybody had that. Resilience came via my circumstances at home in my home life, which ended up standing me in such good stead. It was such a phenomenal, positive learning playground in the long run for the rest of my life. Yeah. Doing 12 months in bed as an 11-year-old was tough, but I broke it down. I didn't have the terminology, the linguistics for it at 11, but I fundamentally broke it down into smaller bites. And I set myself goals, which I didn't realize that's what I was doing. And I did a lot of visualization of what I was going to do and what I was going to achieve. It was sort of like borderline visualization fantasy, but the fantasy part was only maybe a quarter, because really the more that I entertained the thoughts of what I wanted to achieve, what would actually bring me joy and passion and happiness, that was a truth. Like I was lying there thinking, I want to be, because I always loved sports, so I want to be senior girl champion runner next year in primary school. And, let's just throw in senior girl champion swimmer. It was like, are you a swimmer? Are you a strong swimmer? I love the water. I'm a mermaid. But I don't have a swimmer's build. I have an explosive sprinter's build, but not a swimmer's build. But I didn't entertain any limitations. I just went, I'll do that. I think it might be great to take up diving. Yes, let's become a diver.
How wonderful. Like the imaginations and the lack of inhibition. I'm seeing like an anti-stop sign, right? It's sort of got this giant line over it, and you didn't need permission for go. You gave yourself permission for go. You said there is no stop. And for someone who in such a formative year of your life was bedridden, that would have been very hard. And unfortunately, those illnesses stay dormant in our bodies, but we'll talk about that a bit later.
Yeah, there were things that I had to unlearn too.
Yeah.
Like just to quickly touch on human psyche and coaching and all of that. What happened was I very quickly, as you can completely understand, had an association with my bed being a safe place. And my bed was my go-to when life was throwing me curveballs. So I found myself in latter years, much later, when I could make sense of it, I think, why do I always just want to go to bed? Like when things are getting chaotic or too much, it was less about curling up in the fetal position, because that really wasn't my kind of jam. It was more about the safety and security. I felt cocooned in the bed, which just goes all the way back to that 11-year-old little girl that went, oh yes, this has now become, 12 months here has become my safe space to create and visualize and fantasize. And yeah, pretty much, yeah, just safe. A soft place to fall.
Yes, yes. So moving on, becoming a mother as a teenager and a mother of 4 by the time you were a 21-year-old shaped you early.
Yeah, really early. Clearly, becoming a mother at 15 in the 70s was an experience unto itself. Again, I thank the strength. My mother was a tower of strength. Not that I wasn't. I was very firm on what I did want and didn't want. Again, I thank my circumstances and everything that life had already thrown at me. And nobody, it's so interesting because it just wouldn't happen now. But the bullying, really, that's what it was. Repetitive bullying, the constant trying to brainwash you into believing that there's no way you can raise this child. You're too young. And 100%. I was young, but you're too young. You don't know what you're doing. You can't love this child properly. The bullying to adopt my child out was phenomenal and relentless. It wouldn't happen today. They just come around to the hospital bed all the time. But again, what an incredible step in the journey, because I knew that I never ever wanted to give him up. I didn't know innocently how the future looked and how I was going to make all of my dreams a reality with this little bundle of joy. And honestly, he's the best thing I ever did. I'm so pleased. He's now a 46-year-old man, and 46, I got that right. And I couldn't even imagine life without him. So yeah, definitely had its challenges, and the challenges were things that people don't think about, because after I'd had him, I tried doing homeschooling and stuff. The reason Mum was just such a legend was because in those days at 15, Mum intervened saying, hey, I'm here if I need to fill in paperwork to be a guardian. So legally, it looks like he's being taken care of by someone much older and more mature, then that's what I'll do. All the while I was still raising him. But, Mum was just really prepared to do whatever she needed to do to support me, which was really quite incredible, because I know she copped a bit of flack for that too from her circle. Different times, very different times.
Well,
so
yes. I was a single mum at 23. Right. And I know that it was only through the fortune of one of my mother's friends whose daughter had had a child at 16 that my mum got a positive reinforcement or a positive support about it, because otherwise I really think if relied on all of the others around her, I would have been like a pariah. And I basically said, well, you choose to accept us exactly how we are, and you'll be in your grandson's life, or else you won't. So,
but you setting boundaries.
Well, that's right, because when you are a single parent, you've got enough to worry about. You do not need to waste time on people approving or disapproving of you. And I love today how people choose to get married or they don't get married. There is no no stigma at all about who your parents are. How many
There's no pressure. No, and there's no pressure. There was so much pressure.
Yeah.
It came in from all angles in all different ways. The hypocrisy, the beautiful hypocrisy was that if we got married, which his father and I did, my son's father and I did, if we got married, then all was well. So even though I ended up being married at 16, had to get permission, all the bells and whistles, sign all the paperwork, do it all. Even though I got married, I was a married woman at 16, suddenly everything was okay then. Clearly the difference between me being a capable mother and a non-capable mother was the piece of paper that said I was now a respectable married woman. So bless the hypocrisy.
I'm so glad that has changed in the society.
Me too.
Norm. Yeah.
Me too. And then there was this stigma, which fortunately I don't think I had enough energy to entertain it too much. I'd taken myself back to school. There's that grit and grime from an early age. So I decided that I wanted him to learn by my actions. So I thought, I'm not going to be a statistic. I'm not going to be I'm just going to show him that all is doable. You might have to really grind for some things or not, it took the energy. It took a lot of energy, but I didn't notice it because I was so young. If someone asked me to do it today, I'd be like, hooly dooly. I was up at 3 a.m. every morning, lived quite a distance after, getting married from my all-girls school. So I decided I'd go back to that school because the teachers knew me. So it was advantageous for me to go back to that school. It was a long trip in the train and everything to get there every day, and a long trip home every day. And while I was at school, I unexpectedly fell pregnant with our second child. Clearly unexpectedly, like it wasn't planned. So I did the entire school year pregnant. because I had him in the January. And then 3 months later, we lost him to SIDS. So there was the next step in the journey of learning, stepping up, evolving. But here's the humdinger beautiful part of this, which sounds odd to say that with the death of your child. However, I actually didn't have a lot of compassion. I was quite devoid of compassion. Not the person you see today who's super compassionate, but I was quite devoid of compassion because my attitude was pick yourself up by your bootlaces, dust yourself off and move forward. And if you can't help yourself, I am not interested in giving you a nanosecond of my time. I had no time for anyone who wouldn't help themselves or sat in woe me for, I think back and think, oh my goodness, some people, they had every right to be sitting in woe me for whatever was going on in their world. But I was like, okay, woe me for 10 minutes. Are you finished? Okay, are we done? So I had no compassion. So having my first child opened me up to unconditional love. Having my second child and losing him, his name was Adam, by the way. Having my second child and losing him opened me up to compassion. So he gave me that monumental gift through all the pain and the hurt and the heartache. And of course, I wish he was here today. However, I can flip that coin and look at the other side and go, that is the phenomenal gift he gave me.
Beautiful.
Instantly, instantly.
Yeah. Wow. You've lived so many lives. You were big in exercise. You had an exercise business. Were you a hostess with Humphrey B and
exercise. My exercise life was in Canberra around all the different fitness venues in the 80s and at the Australian Institute of Sport. I did a lot of water rehabilitation. But there comes a time, I loved it. However, there comes a time where the body just every day I would get up and I was aching. I had lactic acid build-up. I now know that I had more than just lactic acid build-up, but I was thinking, wow, how come I seem to be in so much more pain than other athletes, especially if I was weight training, which I was doing every day as well. So yes, I had a life in fitness, and yes, I had a life in entertainment. So I did a lot of different things in entertainment. And yes, I was Humphrey B. Bear's sidekick, traveling all around parts of Queensland, doing live shows and visiting the tough gigs, the really rewarding gigs, but the tough gigs, visiting children in hospital who were dying of leukemia or burns, children who'd been badly burnt, and we would do private shows for them. So the reward was phenomenal. The process was tough because you had to keep that beautiful, brave face. That's why we call it entertainment. To see the kids light up like a Christmas tree was, that was gold, absolute gold.
Beautiful. Yeah, I loved Humphrey B. Bear. I had one of his little toys as a child.
I got permission from the TV station, and because there are several people that own Humphrey, so I had permission from everybody, and he actually came to my wedding, my second wedding.
What?
So he was at my second wedding, and he was leading the conga line.
As a bear with no pants would. There you go.
I couldn't really say it when I was his sidekick, but I used to joke and say, with no disrespect for any men who might be watching this, by the way, I used to say, oh, what a perfect man. He wears no pants. He's mute. He's got a few waxing issues, but hey.
Yes.
I don't actually really mean that. I love men.
Yes, absolutely. And then you were a co-owner in a restaurant, and I can remember you sharing stories with me about how you would meet beautiful celebrities as well as everyday people, and how amazing it was to be involved in that restaurant.
There were a few celebrities. I met more celebrities in my entertainment years, obviously, with the various things that I did. As a years later, I actually started a voice business. So we would have people going out for spruikers. I would voice for David Jones and Maya. That led to voicing, emceeing lots of gigs. That led to music gigs. That led to radio stations. That led to voiceovers for radio stations. That led to private corporate clients, press one now. That led to all of that. So, my life has been a series of say yes.
Yes.
Say yes. Someone came up to me. I was actually comparing the aerobic championships in Canberra in the Westfield Shopping Centre. And after that gig was over and CFM were there and they were co-comparing, and a few people came up to me with different job offers, and one of those job offers was, would I like to spruik for Westfield? I asked how much it was. It was all cash in those days. I had, at that stage, 3 small children to take care of. I asked how many hours I'd have to work, and I was flabbergasted to find out that I could make, I think it was $20 or $25 an hour cash way back in the 80s, and I only had to work 4 hours. And I was like, wow. So I said yes. And then I had to go to the library. No Google. I had to go to the library. I asked a few people, said, do you know what spruiking is? And they'd say, no, isn't that something to do with medieval times? And I was like, I think so. But how does that relate to Westfield? So I went to the library to find out what spruiking was. And so I said yes without actually knowing what I was doing.
Well, I'm glad spruiking keeps your clothes on. I'm really pleased about that. But yeah, you definitely do fit the bill of say yes and work it out later. And I look at all of these different versions. There was the point where you were the helm of a multi-million-dollar building development.
Yes, co-helm. So my ex-husband and my second husband and I, we did that. We did the property development game, and we'd had very little experience. We just were both quite visionary, and we could see where things were going. We could see where the market was going. We were both very passionate about property and filled each other's voids beautifully. Because I am a creative and a visionary, and he probably still is, I'm sure, very action taking and very problem solving, mathematical, etc. And I was also great at, and still am, at English and writing up spiels for advertising, etc. We came together and complemented each other really beautifully in business. A lot of people said, how did you handle working together? And I was like, really easily, actually, to be honest. Yeah,
well,
really
when you
easily.
Complement each other's skills and you've got a single vision of what you're wanting to happen, and you're paying attention to what's going on around you, well, you've got a chance. So
we had an amazing time doing that. There were some tough times. There were some poor choices where we researched things, but clearly we hadn't researched them enough. There were lots of gains, as in we had some valuable lessons, so we paid for those valuable lessons. And there were a lot of losses. And, that's just how the cookie crumbles. It wasn't great. Like at the time, there were a lot of losses. In fact, there were so many losses, and then the GFC hit.
yes.
And we managed to just scrape enough together, and we purchased a block of land in North Queensland with its own waterfall and spring-fed creek. And we lived in a tent for over a year, and we, in the process, built a shed home at the time. So we literally started again from the ground up. However, I have to say that time of living in a tent was hilarious, challenging, terrifying, and so rewarding. It reminded you of all the things in life that are so valuable. I never take for granted turning on a light switch. I never take for granted boiling the kettle. And I mean, sure, I'd been camping and things before then, but that's a different mindset. By the time we finished at the campsite, the size of our campfire area was like Wolf Creek Crater. Like, it was enormous. And, you know, we had an outdoor shower and we would pump the water up from the creek, and that's how we showered. And there were still moments when it was quite cold and quite chilly and invigorating. However, that's the beauty of living in a tropical climate as opposed to a cold climate that makes those things doable. Having said that, we were up against packs of dingoes, wild boar, various lethal snakes that would enter the campsite all the time. You know, there's a plethora of stories, some really hilarious, some life-changing. And in that process, we were offered the opportunity to take on the restaurant. And so we actually started the restaurant working 7 days a week while we were still living in a tent with no power and no running water.
So, yeah, figure out how to do it after you've been offered it.
Pretty much.
Wow. And then
that ran for a period of time. It was exhausting, but it was also rewarding. You know, my ex-partner is an amazing chef. He did an incredible job. I ran front of house. He ran back of house. Yeah. And then a cyclone hit, and then flooding hit, and then another cyclone hit, and I think another lot of flooding hit. I've lost track at this point in time, but let's not let the details get in the way of a colourful story. So we ended up closing the doors of the restaurant. It had really taken some big hits, and we'd taken some big hits, and in that process, we lost our shed home that we were starting again, and we relocated to the Sunshine Coast, thinking, okay, we're just going to go and get normal jobs and we'll start again. In that process, and on the car trip down, I got hit from behind. And so another stage of my life began.
So you were severely injured, your back was severely injured in that accident, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was, it's so interesting that the impact was substantial, but it didn't feel as substantial as it clearly was. And I remember being dazed, but getting out of the car because there was a car behind me. So the impact hit a big four-wheel drive behind me, and then the four-wheel drive hit me at substantial impact. And then my previous partner was in the car in front because we were driving both our cars down, so we weren't in the same car. I didn't hit him, but you could see the skid mark, how long it went before, you know, I just missed him. So I remember getting out of the car, being dazed, but my concern was for the car behind me because all I could hear were children screaming. So that maternal instinct, that womanly instinct, if you want, or just that human instinct, to hear those high-pitched wails of kids that are just, they shatter your soul, those kind of wails. And I thought, oh my, you know, not knowing what the car behind, what the condition it was in. So I dragged myself out, and I remember thinking, that hurt. And I had to lean up against the car for a moment to sort of gather myself, and I was feeling quite unsteady on my feet, and it was a bit of a blur thereafter, but I do remember a paramedic coming over and saying, how are you? And I said, look, I'm okay, I'm fine, go and check on the car behind you. And they were already doing that. They didn't need my instruction. They were doing their job admirably. And then a different paramedic came over. I remembered that, and I don't know how much time had passed, and he sort of basically said, you don't look great. And I was like, I'm fine. Remember the Bali bombing gentleman they interviewed on 60 Minutes? We're going way back now for anyone else that's watching this. And he was like, I'm fine. Go and see to everybody else. And in actual fact, he was quite seriously injured. Down the track, I liken myself to him. So, yeah, he sort of did a few feels around my spine and said, no, we need to get you on this gurney. And so started a new chapter of another new arm of my journey in life.
Yes. So with the physical pain that came from that and the hospitalization, did you have repeated operations and surgery?
One major surgery on it. Because of, I'm just going to touch quickly, I know we're going there, because of my autoimmune, they knew the surgery was going to be very tricky. They had to go in through the front of my throat, not the back. The discs were all in an array, and the surgeon said to me later, the surgery took probably 4 hours longer than it should have because of your autoimmune and because of the damage that was already occurring within your body to your bones, to the spine. But the bottom line is, how incredible are they?
Yes.
And they did their job above and beyond and put some titanium in there. Thank you very much.
Okay. Some titanium.
And I love the fact that my children all got together and created what we'd call now a GoFundMe page, but it wasn't a GoFundMe page then. But they put out a page saying, hey, da-da-da-da, and it was shared amongst all of their social media friends, all of my social media friends, and then friends shared it with their friends. And of course it did the whole 6 degrees of separation and all the rest of it, people that I didn't know. So I had private health insurance, but the gap expenses alone were $15,000 just for the surgery without everything else.
Yes.
So I remember that there were kids donating their dollar and their pocket money and their this and their that. So I often think my neck is so full of love and selflessness and gratitude. And I know that sounds a bit corny, but I think of all the people that I know that were incredibly generous, my children for doing this in the first place, and for the support and love of complete strangers.
And you don't get that kind of support without being a shining light, right? And we know that we're made of energy, we're electrical, and we attract different people. And that is you. And with your compassion and with your love, with your determination to keep on going, even when it was to your own detriment by telling them to not pay attention to you. But let's talk about autoimmune disease. So autoimmune, you already had your childhood stint, and then you were diagnosed with another autoimmune condition based on the information that they had at the time. And having autoimmune condition myself, I understand that it is very, very difficult for them to diagnose.
100%.
They do not understand the autonomic nervous system or the autoimmune system, and it is something that I'm sure over the next 20 years there'll be more information about. But was it lupus that you were?
Well, there were several things, because as you well know, and anyone who's watching who has autoimmune knows that once you have one, you usually end up at some point, not that I'm wishing that on anybody who's watching this, however, it seems to be the general rule of thumb. Once you have one, you usually end up with 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. They have a rave party. They just all jump on in, go off to Ibiza, enjoy themselves and have a great time. So I was first diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which we're going way back. Quick segue to obviously my fitness days. I started noticing that I wasn't recovering as quickly. And I started noticing that my joints were extraordinarily painful after I do certain things. Keeping in mind that I was doing a lot of exercise, however, I noticed that my body wasn't responding the way it had been. So I found an amazing doctor who, particularly for that time period, was extraordinarily thorough. And I was not bouncing back. My fatigue levels, I felt like I was being held down with a heavy weight with my fatigue levels. And I was like, what is happening? So he ran a smorgasbord of tests that he could in those days, and then came back and said, I believe, from everything you've presented, and he'd known me for some time, he said, I believe you have fibromyalgia, which at the time was pretty much unheard of. And he said a lot of people will foo-foo that, and a lot of doctors don't believe it's a real thing. But trust me, I've seen enough people with it that my belief system is that it certainly is. So I researched fibromyalgia, went, okay, I might get a bit tired from time to time, I might feel a bit sore, Things kept escalating. So fibromyalgia has stayed. And it's very interesting that I know the difference between a fibro flare or a fibro fog to any of the others. Even though they're so similar, it'd be like saying to an Aussie, you're a Kiwi, or to a Kiwi, you're an Aussie. We know the difference. We can hear the difference. The same with an American and a Canadian. But it's, it's slight. But I can tell the difference. So, okay, on we travel. We've got fibromyalgia. I'm thinking, okay, it's a challenge. We'll work with it. I'll find out what I need to do. I always address things macrobiotically first. So I would, take a look. I was already extraordinarily healthy. And at the time, I wasn't drinking any alcohol or caffeine or anything. So I was like, okay, what else do I need to add into my diet that will help me? So, and that started another journey of being very passionate, learning about foods and interactions with the human body, but that's a conversation for another day. So I chug along, things are not improving. I can feel a decline. I'm not as full of zest as I had naturally been. It wasn't a manufactured thing. That's just who I was. And so let me see, which one was next? So then they said to me, you have Sjögren syndrome. I said, what's Sjögren syndrome? So I was researched that. I was thinking, okay, it affects your eyes and your skin and you this and you that. And I'm thinking, well, that's not nice, but it's not too dramatic. It's all doable. It's drops, it's eye creams. Okay, sometimes I might shed like a snake. How sexy. Again, I can work with it. All right. And then it was, I noticed that my back was really starting to hurt consistently. And it didn't matter how many stretches I did or a bit of yoga or if I walked. It didn't, if I swam laps. I took on all the recommendations and I go, I'm doing it all. And I'm sure it's helping keeping it, what I call the body lubricated, because I notice, and I know speaking to other people as well, that the minute you stop, everything seizes. Like it's so fast. And it's damn hard sometimes to keep moving when things feel stiff and sore and swollen and you feel so suffocatingly fatigued at times. Like no amount of sleep touches it. No amount of rest touches it. So they came along and said that I had a rare form of arthritis. So I don't have rheumatoid arthritis. It doesn't affect me like rheumatoid does. It's more of a seronegative spondyloarthritis, which targets primarily your spine. Hence why the surgery was so much more complicated when they needed to go in and do the spinal surgery. So it was like, okay, this is never going, those words, never, they're so definitive.
Absolutely, they are.
It's so hard and a full stop, there's nowhere to go. And I'm like, no, we need to change that. So there's a lot of it's never going to improve. It's never. You need to learn to live with this. You could be in a wheelchair by this age. Then I started to get a series of events where some of my organs were being attacked. I'd always had blood in my urine. I knew that from when I was a 16-year-old girl, 15-year-old girl giving birth. They'd say, oh, have you got your period? No, there's microscopic blood in your urine. Okay, it was noted. Nothing was ever said about it, done about it. It was never followed through. Okay, I've got microscopic blood in my urine. So the next thing was like, okay, I've got some stuff going on and my kidney function dropped. So my kidney function plummeted. So the next thing, I'm off to see the kidney specialist and da-da-da-da. So then it was like, okay, you've got, let me think, what's it called? Anyway, sometimes the names of everything elude me because, there was such a long list of things over time. My nature was, other than when I had to fill in medical information, I just go, you know what? They're all just holding hands. Like it's just like, flowing into one into the other. Anyway, we got all of that under control. Fortunately, that wasn't a huge one. It was all very doable. Just monitor. I still monitor. I had a drop recently and I just couldn't get myself out of bed. It was okay. It's how it is. It's not okay, but it's how it is. And I know what to do to get me through it and out the other side. And that's my aim. That's always my aim. I need to get through and out the other side. That's what inspires me. That's my motivator.
That's right, because we can't. I know that I have to pace myself, right? So my rheumatologist has told me that I have got an autoimmune condition. He said, but there are so many distinguishing factors that it's really, 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 really hard to diagnose. So the likelihood is I will never know what it's called.
Yeah. And all power to him or her, him, for being so raw, authentic and honest with you, because that's all I ever ask for. Having seen so many specialists over time, my nature is don't give me the fluff, give me the truth, straight down the barrel. Give me your best case scenario, give me your worst case scenario, leave it with me. Tell me what I need to action. I'll tell you whether that's going to be congruent with me, because I started having a big say in my medical journey a long time ago. It wasn't always met with welcome open arms by those in the medical profession. And that's okay, because they have a duty of care and a role to play. I understand that. I also know in the long run the combinations that are best for me. So I started having a few things going on with different organs. But I'm going to speed this up for you, Leigh-Anne. So, and then I got to 40 and 41, actually. I was 41 and I was thinking, I'm just so out of breath. I was going on long walks. So I was living in a very hilly street and I was power walking along, and I hadn't had a 40th birthday party, and I thought, I'm going to have a 41st. I'd have a 41st. So I'd organised this very special, magical 41st birthday celebration for an intimate number of people. I went all out. So I'm, of course, wanting to fit into my glam gown. And that's the other thing I'd always, ever since I was a young child, since I got the rheumatic fever, I could never, ever, ever get my weight stabilised. I still question whether some of that isn't because in those days, they gave me antibiotic injections for 12 months. My whole system, it took years for me to recover from that. And so that was just one of many things. But so I'm powering along and I'm thinking I'm so out of breath, and I feel quite sick when I get back from my workouts, and my chest is really tight, blah, blah, blah. Get through the party, do it all. It's only a couple of days later, and we were going to someone's place for lunch, and they lived up on the hill, and you could park to here, and then it was like terraced stairs. And I got to the front door and thought, I can't breathe. I can't even knock on the door, because if someone opens the door right now, I can't even say hello. I'm sure I must be green. And I was like, I seriously can't breathe. And I sat there and socialized for however it was, 3 or 4 hours, thinking, I just feel so sick. And I said to my then partner, something's wrong, like something's really wrong. And I couldn't sleep flat. I had to keep propping myself up as if you had reflux or heartburn, and all of those things were coming into play, but they weren't there initially. I just couldn't breathe. And I wasn't the size that I am now weight-wise, so it wasn't that. And I was like, anyway, I go to the hospital, and I remember this clearly. They were very busy. It was a little country hospital, and they were very, very busy. And normally they're a fantastic hospital. Like, they just take such good care of you. I've only got good things to say about them. I must have got someone who was just run off their feet. So with my symptoms, they said to me, look, you've got appendicitis. So I let them give me the spiel, and I listened to it all, and I said, well, that would be remarkable considering I had my appendix removed when I was 10. So I said, I don't have appendicitis, bless. And then I was left. And it wasn't until I actually thought, I'm just going to start throwing up and I'm really having trouble breathing, that someone said, look, we better pop her into X-ray. And all I remember is being pulled out of X-ray, and then the whole emergency ward went into meltdown. Absolute meltdown. I was getting jabbed in the legs, left, right, center to relieve fluid, It turned out I had a pericardial effusion, which for anyone not watching is what the pericardium is around the outside of the heart. And it has a small amount of fluid to just give buoyancy so the heart can be protected and move around. Mine had expanded to the size of a football, and it had collapsed my left lung. So my heart was under enormous strain. My lung was under enormous strain. My poor body was under enormous strain. And long story short, after a lot of things to stabilize me, they finally got me on an airlift, and they couldn't get me to Brisbane to the heart specialist because they were full. So I ended up going to Townsville, and then they couldn't stabilize me through the night. So they put me in for emergency surgery the next day. So they removed all the fluid, or as much as they could. And then I had a long road of getting my lung back into a functioning state because it had been collapsed for quite some time. So I'd been operating on one lung without even realizing it. I thought, oh, there's something to this turning 40. For an intelligent woman, I'm thinking, wow, there's something for this turning 40. Look what happens. The body just changes like that. So anyway, I just set about with gusto. If there's one thing I'm great at, it's rehabilitation. I have had so much practice, and we haven't even, it's like the tip of the iceberg of what we're talking about here. So with gusto, I ended up on the rehabilitation trail yet again. Golden child, glowing rehabilitation queen here. And in that process, I saw several rheumatologists, and they, went about having a chat about my case because they found it fascinating. Apparently they used my case with the size of the pericardial effusion in lectures at the medical part in the medical university in Townsville. So, at least that, look at me, I'm helping medical students in the future. So they came in and said, we believe with all the testing we've done and my ANAs, my anti-nuclear antibodies for anyone with autoimmune or who doesn't know about autoimmune, they were sky high. They were off the Richter scale. And they said, have you had any rashes? And I had rashes on my trunk, and I'd had different rashes around my face. And they said, we believe you have lupus. So it was like, okay, we've got the big daddy now. The big daddy's, lupus is heading the way. There's not too many above lupus other than AIDS and a couple of others and one other, I think. Anyway, it was like, okay, we've got the big daddy over. And I thought, right, okay. All right, what do we do now? So what's the plan of attack for this one? So that one was far more challenging. It was a lot of guinea pigging on a lot of different medications, that I, kicking and screaming, didn't want to take. I'd gone from leading a pretty organic macrobiotic life to suddenly I had containers worth of tablets everywhere and a lot of sleeping. My body, that it really took it out of me. Like it took a long time to recover, but recover I did. And let's see. So 20 odd years, way over the 25, 26, 27 odd years of taking all fine tuning, throwing out the window a few lupus meds, going, you know what, I'm ditching those and I'm going to address this with food, exercise, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes I make good choices. Sometimes I made choices I needed to make to realize that actually that's not going to cut it for me. I'm in a world of pain. I need to go back to this. Always kicking and screaming because I'd rather not. I tried to reboot my system umpteen times through fasts and juicing programs and you name it. Just you pick something, you can pretty much put a tick next to it. I've done it. I'm open to it. I'm still open to it because, you can't be closed-minded. I don't believe you can be closed-minded about these things. And medical science doesn't always have all the answers. My most successful combinations, as I'm sure is much the same with you, Leigh-Anne, is a combination, exactly that word. It's a combination of multiple things. The action I take for me, the movement I do for my body, the sleep I give it, learning how many hours sleep I need to be able to function properly, what I do to keep my inflammation levels down. Also, at times saying, bugger it, I'm human. I want that glass of wine. I'd love that glass of bubbles. Even though I'm going to pay a price for it, the difference is I'm making that decision and I know that I'm going to have to work on the next couple of days doing something, but life is for living. Someone else may choose to do it differently, but I am a person that loves to embrace life in all its glory.
And that's the important part, Karen, is that we are, we can be faced all of these challenges, all of these illnesses, all of these economic issues. We can be educated or not educated. But when we are making our own decisions and we are choosing, number one, to live the life that we want to live, and then making our decisions around that and understanding the price that you have to pay, but knowing, like, I know my husband's currently babysitting the grandkids. Now, his back is very bad. However, his joy in babysitting the grandkids is endless. So,
Yes.
of course, he's going to do everything he can to play trains and blocks and everything and deal with the discomfort tomorrow.
Yep.
And
100%.
that's what we have to do. And it's like, you know, the story that you told me about hip hopping with your granddaughter, right? Which ended up causing you severe knee problems. And I would love to share that story.
I will, but I'll go back because you asked me such a good question about lupus. So to wrap that up, after 20 odd years, it turned out I have now a new rheumatologist from Monash University. He is so thorough. He's amazing. And he said to me, guess what? I was like, oh, what? What now? And he said, I've got some good news. I said, well, he said, you don't have lupus. And I went, what? And he said, you were misdiagnosed, which in those days, easily done. He said, because now we look for this particular, it's not a gene, it's like a mutation in the gene. He said, now we know what to look for. If you've got that, we know you've got lupus. If you don't, you don't have it. He said, you don't have it. I went, oh, fantastic. So I've been taking meds for lupus all these years. And he said, but we do know what you do have now. I said, great. Is it better? He said, he's funny. I like him. He said, you have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And I was like, what's Ehlers-Danlos syndrome? I'd never heard of it. I do know a few people who have various autoimmune, still hadn't heard of it, had to Google the hell out of that, learn all about it. And the first thing he said to me was, when you were a kid, were you really athletic? Were you good at gymnastics and diving? And I went, yes. He said, always super flexible. Yes. And on he's gone, rattled off all these things. And I've gone, yes. He said, that's absolutely sensational when you're young. But as you start to age, it becomes a real issue. So problems with the joints, problems with ligaments, tendons, plus all the autoimmune, most of what I call the generic symptoms, the pain, the restlessness, restless legs, the enormous fatigue, all of that, crushing fatigue, all of that. So still all of that. So now I'm in a transitional period where I'm actually learning what I can do to help that, and also becoming acutely aware of how my future looks and understanding now why, as we segue into hip hop, why certain things have become even a greater challenge for me than I ever anticipated. So my twin granddaughters and I decided that we would make this beautiful memory together. So there was an opportunity, you know, I used to passionately love to dance, and my granddaughters have been dancing since they were knee-high to a grasshopper. So there was an opportunity to do a flash mob where we lived to surprise people for their wedding. And it was quite a large production. It was amazing. I asked my granddaughters if they'd like to be involved. So we got to do this together. It was just absolutely fantastic. And everything was going great guns. And they were having a good old time laughing at Granny, who was a bit rusty, and I was going, I got this. I got to pick up my speed on the old hip hop. You know, who does hip hop in there at the time in the 50s? So it was the rehearsal. We did the rehearsal on sand. And during the course of the rehearsal, I did one hell of a tear. But the show must go on, as they say. And so then I danced on it for the actual event. And it turned out that I'd torn my meniscus, which is not great, but not shocking, and could have been probably rectified early on. But unfortunately, COVID hit.
Yes.
And there was this massive delay, and it was one delay after another, trying to get to a specialist, trying to get to a hospital. Delay, then more delay. And it was like this comedy of errors left, right and centre, except that it wasn't that funny at the time. And then by the time I finally got to seek a second opinion and a third opinion and a fourth opinion, the damage was extensive. They couldn't do anything with it. And with my autoimmune, they had then had all these fluid buildups in the knee that had been aspirated, but I was always getting more because my body was just in overdrive fighting against it. And then over time, of course, here comes what everybody's expecting to hear. The right leg took a lot of the strain, even though I was so careful to try not to do that. It did, and now both knees are inflamed and having their own little great time together. The short answer is that I'm supposed to have a knee replacement and then probably another knee replacement. I will put that off as long as I possibly can, because at the moment, on a good day, I can still do some of the things I love to do. On a poor day, not so much. I miss dancing. Dancing has been one of the things that I've had to let go, but I think I'm going to become the queen of the standing still, moving my hips and arms dance.
Yes. So, dance like a bloke. I apologise to every man listening. I don't mean it.
I was about to say, I have been blessed in my time to have known some wonderful male dancers, and my fiance is an incredible dancer. So, I think he misses dancing with me. But, I still have this little voice in my head that goes, oh, it's good. It's just a couple more months and you'll be out there again on the dance floor. Like, it won't settle for that response of, no, we're done. It just won't. And I won't.
And it's important to set, again, your own goals, set your own boundaries, set the actions. I know that I was at an Elvis impersonator recently and I could barely stand. I'd used a walker all day at a conference, was exhausted, but the memory of dancing to Elvis came out. So I was dancing, but then I couldn't walk. So I could only dance, I couldn't stand, and I couldn't walk. But I had a ball.
I was going to say, it was worth it though, wasn't it?
It was so worth it. And I rested the next day. It was okay. I didn't hurt myself, which is the important thing.
Yes.
Now, I met you when we were studying human behaviour together.
Yes.
Right? Coaching. And I know that you've gone on and beyond the training that I did with you, and that you're now using hypnotherapy to help people with relationships, with their own self-image, with their own self-worth. And I think that is only something that we can do when we know ourselves, right?
That's true.
Because how can you guide somebody without having an awareness of where you're taking them? And I love the job title that you've given yourself, the Love Hypnotherapist.
It's fairly fresh. It needs to be expanded on, as in I need to get it out there, so to speak.
Yeah.
It came about because of all the things that you said, and seeing so many people, a lot of women of various ages, young girls that had no idea who they were, beautiful young women who were making poor choices. And it all stemmed from a lack of self-love, self-respect, self-esteem. You could go on, pick one, regardless of their backgrounds, because some had traumatic backgrounds, some didn't. And then there was a large percentage of women from 48 onwards that had marriages fail. They'd been together for a long time. They'd raised the kids, and in the process of their partner either then moving on with someone else or just seemingly to them living their best life, their self-worth, self-love, self-confidence plummeted. They lost parts of themselves faster than steam from a kettle.
Yes.
So I was looking at both ends of the spectrum, and I was getting a lot of people to me for various forms of human behavior and hypnotherapy. I was pretty much running the gauntlet on all types of hypnotherapy. A lot of people started coming to me after COVID for anxiety, non-clinical depression. There are quite a few of them. And I was looking at these people thinking, well, I'm not diagnosing you because I don't have a qualification to do that on that level. However, you are not coming across to me as being classically anxious, especially when I would dig down and chunk down and have conversations about things. It would be that you've just lost yourself in the process. You've lost your worth. You've lost your passion. I say to people regularly, it's not about overlaying who I am or people like myself. You don't have to be gregarious. Passion comes in all shapes and sizes, as you well know. The minute you lose your passion or zest for anything, it can be whether it's gardening, cooking, physical activity, intellectual conversations, whatever it is, the minute you lose your zest, your life force, your life energy starts to deplete. And it's not always easy to recharge that. And when that starts to deplete, you start to question, because it's human behavior to question things. You start to question, what about this? What about that? Perhaps I haven't seen so-and-so for so long because maybe this upset them, or maybe it's because I haven't reached out, or maybe. The forward pacing becomes phenomenal. So there's all different ways to lose yourself. And so I thought the energy, I'd helped a lot of people with a lot of different things, but fundamentally I decided with everything I was going through personally and what I was seeing, I really wanted to target helping people feel more loved, more confident. I wanted to have selfishly, in a good selfish way, I wanted to have a tiny minuscule amount of input to help them on that journey, because I can only imagine it must be someone who's like a marriage celebrant. They're always in that abundant energy of love and seeing the best in people. I've seen a lot of different sides to people. To be able to bring confidence and love and self-worth back to a woman, a man, pick a pronoun, to bring it back to them, and then watch them take that and become passionate about life again and start setting goals for themselves, traveling, marathons, you name it, whatever it might be, and then organically setting boundaries. Boom.
It is so amazing. And we think that the door's shut, right? That the door to that purpose and passion is shut. But it's not. But finding the key to open that door again, is sometimes needs an objective observer, person to hold your hand, to pat you on the shoulder and say, come on, you've got this.
Too, Leigh-Anne. I mean, so true, so right. The other thing as well is that not everybody is ready to do what sometimes can be, as you and I both know, painful work to chunk down and find out the root cause of this and the root cause of that and where that belief system stemmed from, etc., etc., etc. They're just not ready, or they're too fragile. They're coming out of something huge and they're really fragile. Hypnotherapy is kind.
Yes.
It's a kind way of holding out the hand and saying, we don't need to do all of that. Like, clearly, it'd be great if you looked at that down the track. But how about you just take my hand and we just overlay this, plant some new seeds into the subconscious that are going to be highly beneficial to you growing and feeling absolutely magically wonderful about yourself. Whatever you need, strength, confidence, to have a voice again. The amount of people that lose their voice.
Yes.
To have the confidence to speak up for yourself and say it with respect, but being strong, feeling empowered. Hypnotherapy is a very kind way. You can do it on its own or as a complementary, and you can have more than one. There's no limit on how many hypnotherapies you can have. It's not like they clash.
No, that's right. That's right.
So I find it a very kind way of supporting people on their journey, particularly the ones that don't have the strength to address it in other ways initially.
And then once you have the strength from being helped, then you have more energy to possibly opening one of the belief systems that's blocking you so that you can move on. And
Exactly.
because, when you don't have the energy to do it, it seems impossible.
And it's not my role or your role to create more overwhelm in that person's life. They're clearly going through a lot. They've clearly been brave enough to actually extend the hand and reach out and say, hey, I need help. I just don't know how, where, when. I need help. And I feel like I can only give this amount at this point in time.
So
It is.
Karen Lyons shows us that while bodies can break and circumstances can collapse, the spirit can rise stronger, brighter, and more loving than ever before. From teen motherhood to the heights of business success, from life-altering illness to seasons of rebuilding, her path has led her to become the Love Hypnotherapist, a woman whose very presence invites others to soften, heal, and open to love of themselves before love of others. Her journey reminds us that self-love isn't indulgence, it's medicine. It's the force that lifts us when the world tries to keep us down. Karen, thank you for sharing your courage, your wisdom, and your joy. You remind us all that no matter what we face, love, deep, embodied, and unapologetic love is the path home. Thank you, Karen.
So much, Leigh-Anne. Very much.
Wonderful.
This has been Suddenly Different. I'm Leigh-Anne Sharland, and I'm so grateful you shared your time with me. If you felt a spark, a tear, or a moment of recognition, I hope you'll pass that gift along by sharing this show. Take a deep breath, trust your path, and I'll meet you back here soon.